how do you gain more time? This is a very interesting question that I had when I was a kid, and I played a very interesting game, experimented, like went through life observing people to figure out how to gain more time, right? We think of time as like a one way process, and it's very finite, and that is most probably true based on how our brain operates. But I ended up having to figure out how to gain more time because my thinking as a kid was, I had a life event that set me back many years, right? And my question was, if you're in a disadvantaged starting point in society and it's going to take you longer to get to your dreams, if ever, how do you then gain more time, right? Because you technically need more time. So if it's going to take 30 years and to get to, let's say, point one, and your friends are at zero, it's going to take them 30 years to get at one, and you're at minus one, so that means you need 60 years, but you don't have 60 years, right? You don't have 60 years to get to one. Maybe you have a total of 90 years in life, and you want by 30 to be at one, but you're 60 years behind 30. So what do? I went through a lot of observation. So observing a lot of people, maneuvers they did in life to get where they got and so forth. And the biggest pattern I saw was people who ended up having everything they wanted in life eventually. They froze time and gained time by skipping life events and taking unorthodox paths, right? So a couple of normal things that I saw, like the most repetitive patterns, were delaying getting married, traveling a lot, switching careers, taking an unusual path through school, right? And as I went through my own life experience, I saw a manifestation of each one of those things. So traveling, every time you're traveling, you end up having to start afresh. Every time you're traveling, you're resetting. And every time you're resetting the clock, you're starting from zero. And it's a very weird experience because then it feels like you're starting life all over again many times. And the more countries you travel to, and live in, the more you're starting afresh multiple times, and every time you do that, you're resetting your point one, right? Your point zero. And every time you're resetting point zero, you're developing a certain muscle of maneuvering your way from zero to one that someone who is just driving the process throughout in one place isn't experiencing, right? So for you, it feels like it would feel like you've lived a very, very long time because of those resets. It feels like it's multiple lifetimes versus someone who has been in one, like when they were born and that's it, right? They grew up in the same city, etc., etc. The second maneuver is if you delay massive life events. So most of us, our lives are set such that we have a couple of life events. You're born, you go to school, you get married, you have kids, and you die, right? So 5 milestones. If you interrupt any of those milestones, you'd be stretching your life. It's a very weird thing, right? So it's not like mathematical aging, numbers, but your life expands every time you disrupt any of those motions. Now, you can't disrupt when you were born, so you're born, right? If you disrupt your school path, let's say you finish high school, you didn't go to college, then you went to college, 5 years later, and then you didn't add your master's then you worked, and then you went to master's, right? Every time you're going back to school, disrupting, going back to school, redisrupting, you're putting yourself back to the age where you're going back to school. It's like you're reliving that younger self over and over again, right? Now, the trick is to keep maximizing the output every time you're doing a repetition, every time you're disrupting that process. The same thing happens when you're switching careers, right? So you go into banking, You leave banking, you get into, I don't know, you start in construction, you leave construction, you get into media. Every time you do that, it's like you're opening a portal into another life path where you were in media. So like there's one life path you're in banking, there's another life path you're in media, there's another life path you're in construction. And every time you do that, you're layering those life paths, so your experience in life feels like you're living a very, very, very long life, right? Now, then the same thing happens with other life events. Now, the trick is the longer you delay irreversible life events, like having kids. Having kids, you can have as many kids as you want, but you have the first kid and that's it. It's a one-way process. The longer you delay irreversible processes like that, the more your experience of spending the earlier life expands, right? So if you have kids, I've met a lot of people who had kids in their 40s and 50s. The way we experience those people and the way they experience their own existence, they feel, if they have kids at 45 and it feels like they had kids, like the same way you feel having kids at 30 is the same way they would feel having kids at 45 and 50. So it feels like they've frozen that period for 15 years, for 20 years, right? And the advantage of playing this, freezing time game is we have we have varying degrees of handling external events. So we have the economy, you have inflation, you have where your starting point in life, and that determines maybe how long or how difficult it is to get to your dreams. And all these things will, the currency is time. They require time for you to maneuver and get settled. And we panic because we feel like there isn't enough time, and by 60 we'll be working hard and da-da-da. But the way to shortcut that is to start playing this game of freezing time so you can gain more time. And that time is the currency you use to get to your dreams, right? So you find that the hack is you'll get your math, the straight line math was finish college at 22, get paid, you get a 6-figure job, and you have everything you want by 25, get married, da-da-da. And that doesn't happen, fall flat on your face. And that doesn't mean you're doomed. That means you start playing a time freezing hack that will get you to your dreams. That's a certainty. It will get you to your dreams. But you'll have maybe your first child at 50. Or you have to go back to school, when you're 35, right? And so forth. So you have all those fragments. And you'll travel to another country, right? Because your dream isn't bound by geography, right? So you travel to different countries, relocate, and so forth. And what ends up happening is by the time you get to your, to the end of your life trip, you look back and you realize you've lived a very long, eventful, adventurous life, had your dreams, had the material expression of your dreams, all the material results, and you still got to do everything else, right? So that has been my experience so far. I'm not 60, but I feel like I've lived 5 lifetimes, right? I've lived in so many countries, that's for sure. I've had to start over many, many, many times. That's been a massive advantage. And I've experienced everything I always wanted. So I do music, I get paid, I earn very well from music. I ended up living in LA, so I ended up being on a movie, which to me, if you ask me 10 years back, to be like an absolute wild dream. It'll be like, you know what? I'm old now, in my 20s, never even went to art in school. So it's not going to happen. I'll just stick to business. But that happened. And I'm running a business. And so I'm doing I wrote a book. So everything I actually always wanted to do, I actually am doing. But I had to play this time freezing game to gain time and get to do what I want and merge these different alternate universes where I'm doing these multiple things, merge them into this one reality that I created for myself. So that's a trick that I would invite you to explore and see how that works out for yourself.